And welcome, everybody. I'm glad you were all able to come and join us this evening. Obviously, public member trees are something that interests almost everybody because anybody who uses Ancestry inevitably comes into contact with the public member trees. And there really are several different extremes that I've seen with respect to the public member trees. There are people who put great stock in them. The novice genealogist, first timer, getting onto Ancestry will sometimes find information on a public member tree and say it's gospel, it must be true, and will use it and rely on it very heavily. At the other end of the spectrum are people who refuse to look at it at all, who say that they are full of garbage, that they are full of errors, and therefore want nothing to do with them at all. And I think the sound approach is somewhere in between those two extremes. We as genealogists want to look for clues in every place that we can when we're doing our research. And the public member trees are certainly a valid place to look for clues. The thing that we need to do is be careful with them, to treat them with some skepticism, and to view them as a tool, just as we would use any kind of source as a tool. We want to verify everything we find. And so if we approach them in that light, I think that we can get some useful information out of them. So let's fasten our seatbelts and let's get going. This is what the public member tree screen looks like on the library version of Ancestry. There are two versions of Ancestry, by the way. There is the home version, which most of us have. There's also the library version, which you can get to in public libraries. I will say that in terms of the experience in using the public member trees, it's a much richer experience if you are a subscriber rather than viewing the trees from the library version. I've been experimenting just even the last month using both versions, just seeing how the public trees work on them, and you can get far more hits if you are a subscriber than if you are a public member user on a library version. Why that is, I don't know. It has something to do with the algorithm that Ancestry provides, but I did test searches for people in my own tree, and I have a public tree, and I can't find them at all on the library version of Ancestry. If I go into the subscriber version of the public member trees, I can find them. Sometimes they're buried deep down, but they're there. So be aware of that if you're using a library version of Ancestry, you're not getting necessarily a full range of hits when you're using the trees than you would if you were a subscriber. That said, there's both, as I say, gold and there's junk to be found in the trees. There are gems such as original family Bibles, photographs, and documents that are available nowhere else but on the trees. But there's also a lot of misinformation, information such as 100-year-old women or 6-year-old girls giving birth to children, or men fathering children 3 years after their deaths. Anyone who has used the trees has seen these kinds of problems. So the goal of this lecture, really, I have three. The first is to look at the public member trees as a library user and as a home subscriber, and just show you what they're like. Two, give you some techniques for evaluating the data that you find on them. And three, and I think most important, are ways that I want to give you some tips to show how you can add more value to your own tree if you are a subscriber. And hopefully, going forward, we can all work together in making the trees a better experience. So let's begin by looking at, you're starting out. You have a subscriber, a new subscriber to Ancestry, and you are given an invitation to start a new tree. Actually, you as a user, you can create a number of different trees. You're not limited to only one. You can post a number of different trees, and you can make some of them public and some of them private. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But this is how the opening screen looks as you're just beginning. It invites you to be the home person, and it shows you all the steps to begin building them. This is my own 5-generation chart on the public member trees. I've been on member since 2012 as a subscriber. I've been a user in the library version even before that. And I've got about 19,000 some names in my tree over time building it. You can add photos, you can link census records to attach to them. And as you proceed there, as you see, there are little green leaves that are up at the corner of each of the names. You won't see the green leaves on the library version, but you will find them on the home version. So you click on a leaf. This is my great-grandfather. And if I click on his leaf, a little box will then appear, and you'll notice that I will have hints that I can get to. This says that I have 6 ancestry hints about him. So we can click on the leaf again and then see the list of leaves hints that would come up there, and you can then evaluate those as you go. The hints can be a number of different things. This is my great-grandfather's page, and then I can find different hints for links to other trees that may match him. This is an old slide from a previous version of Ancestry, but you can see that, for example, that I have under his name is William Warren Beatty. I have another hint for a William Warren Beatty that matches quite well on the lower left side, but the top one, Warren Beatty, born 1857, is to someone completely different, not our person. So we're going to get hints from trees of other people's trees that are good matches and some that are terrible matches, and you'll find people that actually may have your ancestor but have wrong information attached to him or her. And that's the kind of thing we're going to have to look at, and where novice genealogists just beginning to use Ancestry can run into problems because they can find Ancestry hints and they'll accept those hints without looking at them critically. And when that happens, we can get a lot of junk put into the public member trees that makes it very difficult for us to use. Ancestry was begun in 1990. It was founded by a group of 2 BYU graduates who used floppy disks with LDS file information on them, and then it began to build up. So what we find on the public tree format right now are a number of different components. There's the old Ancestry World Tree, which has 467 million names on it. There's something called One World Tree, which has about 120 million names on it. There's the Millennium File, which has only 913,000 records on it. Then there are public member trees that we have today that has over 2 billion plus names on them, probably more than that now. And I've heard that there's something like 18 million people that have tested their ancestry with DNA on it, even though they have not filled out a tree. So all of these things go into weaving in together what we consider the public member trees. If we look back at my great-grandfather's slide again, we'll note there that as we look for clues that the trees will not come up automatically, nor will they necessarily appear when we do a general search. As I will show, even when I type in the accurate information of a person that I know is in my tree, Ancestry will not necessarily pull it up in the search. This is extremely aggravating, and it underscores why the trees can be frustrating and misleading. The algorithm that Ancestry has created is limited, and while it's a wonderful resource and has a lot of information on it, it doesn't always display everything that we want it to display or hope it will display. And so coming to that realization means that we have to treat the trees carefully. What are some of the old files? Again, let's look at them a little bit more. The Millennium File was created, this is an old Ancestry slide, but the Millennium File was a thing that was created along with other collections, along with the private member trees, the public member photos, scanned documents, and Ancestry World Tree, which was an old tree system that they had. All these things file into these together. The private member trees are another tool. You will note that some trees on Ancestry are private rather than public. You find this especially if you test your DNA and you get matches, and you'll find that there are trees that you simply can't see or simply can't access. And that's because the subscriber to Ancestry has chosen to make their tree private. And there's nothing wrong with that. People can make it public or private, and there are reasons for doing it one way or another. The reasons for keeping a tree private are, 1, you may have personal documents or photos that you wish to link to your tree but don't wish to share with other people. The pictures are private and you don't want them up on a public format. There's a feeling too that maybe the whole tree is a matter of privacy. There may be personal things in a tree, such as illegitimacies or certain things that we don't want the public to share. Some people are afraid of finding out the name of a maiden name of a mother or something, thinking that maybe the security will be compromised. There are people who feel that the effort they take to compile a tree is from original sources is a personal effort, and they may want to keep that effort private rather than just share it with everybody. They may want to do a book or an article later on, and they may want to keep the information private so that when they do publish their book, they can keep that information with a pow when the book comes out, rather than have their thunder stolen from them beforehand. Some people use the trees to test theories. They put up hypotheticals on their tree, like a possible father, possible mother. They may want to look for possible DNA matches, but they float a trial balloon on a tree, and so they use the trees as hypotheticals and not necessarily as something that's finished or completed or proven. And so they want to keep a tree private because they're testing out theories that way. And finally, 6, they may want to shield themselves from unwanted comments. When you have a public tree and people access it, they can send you emails if you're a fellow Ancestry subscriber, and some people don't want that. For some people, that's a plus. For some people, that's a minus. So those are all valid reasons for keeping a tree private. Here's an example from my own tree. My trees are public, but I have this picture of my grandmother with her older sister taken in 1899 in Louisville, Kentucky, and her name was Helen Meyer. Her older sister was Edna. Meyer's a pretty common name, and I noticed one time that someone had taken her photo and used it on their tree. I mean, it wasn't anybody that I was related to, and it turned out that they also had an Edna and a Helen Meyer in their family, but it wasn't the same people. They just looked at the names and took the picture, and so that could bother some people. Some people don't want their pictures that they put up there taken and used for incorrect people, because all of a sudden then the information about them gets convoluted. Thankfully, the person took the tree down or took the picture down when I explained to them that it was, when I asked them how their connection was. But that's the sort of thing that can happen, and I'll show you some more examples as we go along. Reasons to make a tree public, and there are a lot of good reasons to keep a tree public, or at least one version of a tree public. That means that your real relatives can contact you more easily. Yes, they can download information from it and attach it to a wrong person, which can be a big problem. However, you can, as a researcher, can benefit from the contacts that you make from the people that find you in your tree. There are more opportunities for sharing information, pictures, letters, diaries, Bibles. And if you share yours, maybe others will share theirs, and you can find something that some distant cousin of yours has that you didn't know about, a picture or a family Bible or something like that. So sharing is receiving as well as giving. Finding new information others have can be a wonderful story. I have a great-great-grandmother, a German immigrant, who had a brother who stayed behind in Germany. And I put this information up on a tree, and lo and behold, a descendant of this brother who lived in the 1800s contacted me and sent me documents that he had of the family from German sources that went back to the 1930s, from churches that were no longer around. The records were destroyed, but the information that they had from certificates gave information for 2 more generations back that I didn't have, and I would have had no chance to find because the records of the churches were gone. So if I hadn't connected with that cousin through my tree, that information would never have come to me on my tree. So a good thing happened from there. Plus, you can gain new clues from the research of others, and some people can look at your tree and maybe correspond with you, and you can work together to solve a problem, to break through a brick wall. And so having a tree online and having it public is a good thing in that sense. So it just depends on how you want to look at it and what your interest level is in genealogy, and how much you are up for exchanging information with others. I like that aspect of it. I enjoy exchanging, so I'm glad to have my tree up online, even though there have been problems with it. This is where the public tree link is on the library version of the page. So we have lots of people coming to the library using the public member trees as they connect online. A lot of first timers who don't have Ancestry at home pull this up. Just so you know, though, that the library version, as I say, is very different from the home version, and the number of links, number of hits you get on the public member trees from the library version is substantially less than it is on the home version. So just be aware of that if you're doing that. Let's look at a problem that I have in my own tree where people have convoluted a name in my own tree with a different person, and how the problem can get compounded over time. So I have a collateral ancestor named John Beatty. He was a older brother of my ancestor. He was born in Ireland in 1774. So I'm going to do a search for him, and we'll begin to unveil a problem that can happen with the public trees. I could be more specific about him, giving his date of death and giving his marriage and so forth, but I choose not to be. I'm just saying that he's born in 1774 in Ireland. And you'll notice the number of hits there. There are a number of things come up. There's a John Beatty with the right birth date and the right death date, but the wrong death place up there, and the wrong spouse. And then we go down. One below him is correct, but they have the wrong parents with him. You go down below him, they have the wrong place in Ireland. Right spouse, wrong parents again, and then another one below that where the bottom arrow is right date of birth, slightly wrong date of death by a year, the right spouse, but again, wrong parents. So a lot of problems can happen, and that's because those little green leaves that I showed you can sometimes pull up people that are with very similar birth and death dates and convolute them and point inexperienced researchers to the wrong information in the trees. And so they put down the wrong information, and then it happens like it can spread as we go through. If you look at the different results, one man lived in Butler County, Pennsylvania. The other man, the right guy, who's my ancestor's brother, lived in Sandusky, Erie County, Ohio. So how could they get so badly messed up? And there are problems here, but I have a page for him on my own tree. I have a number of things I've built into his page to prove that he is who he is. I've added all of the census records to him from 1800 to 1840. I've added a family Bible that was his. I've added a number of newspaper ads that he put in the papers for him. I've put in several deeds for him. So I think I've done a fairly good job of documenting him on my own tree, but that doesn't necessarily mean that someone else looking for him will find it using Ancestry's algorithm on the trees, because a lot of junk may come up before my page is even accessible, and that can be a problem. So if I do a search here, and I do a public search for him using the Allen County Public Library, plugging in the public member trees that we have here on Ancestry, and I plug in his name and his accurate date of birth and accurate date of death and his spouse, and this is what the screen I get. I get no hits, even though I have a public tree and that man is on that tree. A user sitting at our computer at the library will not be able to find him using the public member trees on the library version. Now, if I use the subscriber version, the algorithm pulls me up a semi-correct hit, which gives a John Beatty. Reverend is misspelled there. He was not really an ordained minister. He was born in 1774. He was married in 1796. He did die in 1844. So those dates are all correct, but the parents are wrong. The spouse is correct. And then it says that this person is found in 208 additional trees. And those are the trees that we need to go digging for information in, because we cannot assume by the algorithm that the top name that they show on their opening screen is right, or that the information in this first screen is right, because it may not be right. And as we know right here, the wrong parents are linked to this person. So don't give any weight to the order in which hits appear in the public member trees, because they may not be important at all. So we have to dig through, and I have to go through about 5 or 6 pages of hits until I find my tree with my guy here with the correct information on it. So that can be frustrating if your hope is that that the information you're building on here will be accessible to the person out there looking for him. When I first created this tree, I had hoped that descendants of this John Beatty, who would be distant cousins of mine, would find my tree quite easily and would find the information that I put on there, and it would help them as they look back into their family. But that's not necessarily the case, because the individual is buried very deeply into it. You'll note that my tree has 19,000 people on it. Trees that come much earlier than in the order have far fewer people and no records attached to it. So the algorithm doesn't give any weight to the number of people you have or the number of records you've attached or anything like that. In fact, I think that it may discount my tree because this man is a collateral ancestor, a brother of a direct ancestor, and maybe there's some, I don't know exactly how the algorithm works, but maybe they put a less weight on it because it's not a direct, and so therefore someone else putting it as a direct, the algorithm may put that as a higher order. I don't know the answer to that for sure. Just know that you may have to go digging to find the information you want to scroll through. This is an important point to make because one of the best advices I can give you is don't try to police the trees. Wrong information will be out there about your family. Other users will get it mixed up. The problem will grow like cancer through the trees, and there isn't a way for you to stop it. Unless you find the problem on maybe 1 or 2 trees here or there, you can't possibly hope to change it. And it's not worth even to try. If someone else gets it wrong, it's their problem, not yours. You can't control what others submit. The best advice is to add value to your own tree with correct information from original or primary records, and then let your tree speak for itself. Consider writing a book or an article which will get the proper information recorded in a more permanent form. And even if you do all the right things, be aware that your tree may still not be easily found, even if an ancestor appears on many other trees. It all goes back to the search algorithm, which is difficult because there are now so many names being put into the trees. It's difficult to find everything the way we want to find it necessarily. So consider taking this perspective. The trees may not be the only genealogical creation that a person ever makes in a lifetime. They may never write a book. They never create their own genealogy website. They may never write an article. So the trees are an expression of genealogy research by a great many people. The quality will vary dramatically. We have to remember that these are works in progress, that they are constantly being revised, edited, and changed. Wrong information here is not perhaps as detrimental as it would be if it was published in a book or article, especially if you approach the trees in this spirit. They're constantly changing, constantly being revised, and so we should look at them in that light. So as we do our evaluation, we have to ask some questions as we look at a tree and try to figure out whether the information that's being shown to you is accurate. And one of the things we want to ask is, are there specific sources attached to the trees that support or refute the claims being made? How do the matching trees compare or conflict with one another? In other words, if there are a bunch of trees on there, how do they go together or conflict? In the John Beatty example I showed you, there are a lot of changes or trees that don't quite match each other. Are there aspects of the trees that are totally illogical? People giving birth at the wrong age, very old women giving birth to children, or young girls giving birth to children. Are there multiple children with the same name and same birth dates under the same couple in a public page? So you look for those red flags. So going back to our John Beatty problem here, our example, we have, let's type in the name of the other John Beatty who was wrongly confused with mine. He died in Butler County, Pennsylvania, and had a wife named Agnes Nancy Larimer. We will also look under Butler County, Pennsylvania for his death date, and we get this screen. There are 410 trees with his name. The first example shows the wrong birth date and the wrong parents. Those are my ancestors. attached to this person, a wrong date of birth, probably the correct date of marriage, I don't know, but he's in Donegal, Butler County, Pennsylvania. He died there in 1841, which may be the correct birth date. But it's so close, the birth dates and death dates of this John with my John, that the trees were conflated and confused. And you can look back at the responses and see all the different trees that are on there with this guy, and then different dates of birth, different dates of death. They all need to be sorted out. So here's some of the red flags, just to reiterate. The age of a mother may not logically follow from the evidence supplied. Generally speaking, a woman can give birth as early as 12 or as late as about 49, but even those extremes should be suspected whenever you see it in a tree. A person in a tree is listed as deceased, yet events are attributed to him long afterwards, including births of children more than 9 months after the death. Are there multiple listings for the same child, as I said? Are there thousands of names attached to the tree? This is not necessarily wrong. People have been using Ancestry now for decades, and they've built up pretty big trees. And if you include all the siblings of your ancestors and maybe their children and their grandchildren, it's pretty easy to build up lots of names into a tree. So that isn't necessarily a red flag. But if there are a lot of inconsistencies with other member trees, that can be a problem. If there are multiple contradictory sources for the same event or different places at the same time in the same tree, that can be a problem. And finally, if there are no original sources at all, not even census records attached, then you have to question where the person is getting the information. So here's some things you can do. If this John Beatty was your ancestor, let's look at how you can add some value to it. Let's say you've done research on original sources, you have good documentation, you have names and records, and you've researched it well, and you want to present it accurately. One of the things you can do is make your page more discoverable. You can't make your page more discoverable, but at least you can attach correct information. And I want to call your attention to the thing marked gallery, which is under the main name there. And under that gallery, you can start attaching documents. You can attach over at the very right and under an add button. You can upload family Bibles, you can upload stories, you can upload censuses, and a number of other types of documents that allow you to really build up the tree and make it much more usable and interesting to anyone who finds your page. And also is helpful to you as well, because it allows you to sort all your information out. And as you work on building up your tree further, having these documents on there, the deeds, the family Bibles, right at your fingertips makes it easier to get access to that information. It's a nice sorting device to have your documents right there available to you as you go forward. So you click on add, and then you can upload either a photos, you can upload a story, or you can create a story. One of the things I've done with this particular case is add the family Bible pages to John Beatty, because I thought that this would help clarify the problem, and it actually addresses the issue directly. It shows that John Beatty was born in 1774, March 17th, that his parents are James and Ann Beatty of Ballycanoe County, Wexford, Ireland. It shows his wife's the time of his marriage to Mary Cook in 1796 in Philadelphia. So all that information is there, and here is a direct original record that addresses it. And I've attached that to my own tree, but that doesn't mean that other people have found it or have used the information from it productively when we see these people getting confused on all of the other trees. Another thing you can do is write a story. And when we went back to that page, I'll go back up again. You can see create a story there at the bottom of the little circle. When you create a story, you can put in a proof argument. You can write a story of why a problem has occurred on Ancestry and put forth your reasoning of why the problem has happened and why you want to correct it. So you can address the problem and cite the evidence that refutes the problem. So I can point out the documents, including this Bible, which supports my view of the evidence, and then users who are careful can then read my story and decide for themselves if the evidence that I'm presenting is correct. I've written a very simple story here. I could have taken much more time and added even more evidence. Still, I lay out my reasons for why the two men have been confused and why I believe the records attached to the Butler County John Beatty are wrong. I hope Ancestry users will find this. I see that 22 people have saved my story. That's good, even though there are about 400 people out there with this guy on it. These 22 people have found it and have attached the story to their own tree. Hopefully I've helped some people with it. That's something you can do when you have a problem like this, or you're trying to argue for a particular reasoning why someone is connected to someone or why a problem exists. Write a story and lay out your argument. So as I say, attach copies of original primary sources, create customized events for your ancestor, and attach appropriate documents to that, and then write a story or a proof argument and attach it to your ancestor's tree. These are the three main points I want to address for adding value to your tree. So if you're an Ancestry subscriber, this is how you add a story. As I said, you click on that add story, and then you click on how do I want to add your story. I want to upload a story from my computer, and you could write something out in Word and then attach it, or you can write a story right into the program that Ancestry gives you. There are some elements that you might think of if writing a proof argument. These are usually used for people who are writing an article or a book, but the same elements could be added into a proof argument that you write on Ancestry. So first, you want to clearly state the problem to be addressed: who, when, and where. What is the hypothesis or solution to the problem? In this case, John Beatty has been confused. John Beatty of Sandusky was confused with John Beatty of Butler, Pennsylvania. You select pieces of evidence that support the argument, in this case, the family Bible. The order of evidence can be important if you're laying out a number of pieces of evidence. And finally, you want to attach copies of your information to your tree if there's no copyright problems. That helps build your case and shows someone who finds your tree that you know what you're talking about, and you have direct pieces of evidence that tell you, that tell the user, that back up the story, essentially. Don't get frustrated. The trees will always be messy. Your ancestor will get buried, I guarantee it. Correct information will be hard for others to find, even if you go to great lengths to preserve it and attach it to your own tree. This underscores, I think, the own challenge we all have when using the trees. The correct information may well be out there, buried on page 70 or page 50 or page 10 in the public member trees, and may not be easy to find. Don't trust Ancestry's algorithms to bring up the tree, to bring up the right clues, or especially if it's the first tree you displayed, because the algorithm is imperfect and the information may be further buried, and just have to be careful with it when you use it. Photos, I think, greatly enhance the tree experience. And if you have old photos, I like putting them on, even though there's always a danger that someone may borrow it and put it on their tree for the wrong person. It's still a nice thing to have. I think it makes the tree experience better and more usable. And so I have made it a point to put my own and my wife's older pictures up online. Not the living people or not newer people, but the older ancestors. I've certainly put up the pictures, and then I do this because I'm glad to share them. We have a lot of very old ones going back well into the 1800s that I'm glad to put them out there to help others. They will only accept JPEGs. They will not take TIFFs, so make sure they're lower resolution. And finally, always add the provenance of the photo if known. Where did you have it? Where did you find it? How is it passed down in the family? Because that makes the photo much more valuable to others who use it. And also will help your own tree be more user-friendly and valuable, because if you add the provenance, it means that you know what you're talking about. You put the photo into context. Let me show you some examples. These are two pictures of my great-great-great-grandparents that I just found a couple of years ago. They are in the collection of Western Kentucky University down in Bowling Green, Kentucky. They belonged to a first cousin of my grandfather, a lady named Irene Neal, and she apparently got them from their step-grandmother had them, but no one else in the family really knew about them. This Irene was a maiden lady who died without children, and she's long dead, so I really couldn't ask her about them. Her collection, fortunately, all went to the university, and these pictures were among them. And I had to do some detective work to figure out exactly who they were because there were no identifications on the backs of them. And I had to try to make sense of who they were. So doing the detective work helped me figure out who they were. You notice the word Travis is written up in the corner of them. And the man I thought on the left looked much older to be my great-great-great-grandfather, who died only at the age of 58 in 1864. His wife died in 1882 at age 72, so she looks more correct. But I noticed, looking at the picture on the left more carefully, that it was a copy of a much older picture, a daguerreotype probably, that his wife probably took into the photographer. She wanted a pair of portraits made. And they used to do that. They used to make copies of pictures. So they took the older daguerreotype and they made a copy of it. And then they took her picture from life and they made the portrait together. And there's some clues here that allow us to make that conclusion. We notice that the man's coat has been painted on. If you look carefully at the original, you can see that there's an edge on it that like a rounded oval edge, and the photographer painted down on it. And if you have a high resolution of it, you can tell that there's a lot of in-painting of white hair on the hair and the beard that weren't there necessarily originally. We don't know exactly what the original picture looked like. And we did some research on who Travis was. At first I thought these were the names of the people, but no, there was a photographer named John B. Travis who worked in Franklin, Kentucky in the 1870s and early 1880s, exactly at the time that my third great grandmother would have gone in to have these pictures made. So Travis was certainly his signature that he wrote on there. After doing this kind of research, trying to figure out who the photographer was, looking at the clues I could get from all the pictures, I was pretty confident that these were pictures of my great-great-great-grandparents, Edward and Polly Neal, that they were not Irene's other ancestors from her mother's side, because they had lived in a different part of Kentucky. So they came from the Neal side, and the provenance was right. So if I'm going to put these people on my tree, here's just a basic summary of who they were. If I'm going to put these people on my tree, and I've loaded him up there, I can go into the gallery, and you can see where his name is. Like if I wanted to upload his picture again, I would go to the upload screen box there, and then I would allows me to choose a file, and I choose the file to add him to the screen, and then there is his picture. I can put at the right, there's a box where I can add in additional information. I can say that it's a copy of an 1864 era portrait made by John C. Travis about 1880. The photo is in the collection of Western Kentucky University. So I'm telling the user where the picture is. I tell where it came from the collection of the late Irene Neal of Auburn, Kentucky, who was the daughter of James Edward Neal, and I give the line of her line back to him. And I talk about how I was able to identify it. I could write even more information on there, but this helps this user who finds this portrait on the tree, so it's now public, who this person is and where the original is and how to find it. So that's the kind of thing you want to do when you upload a picture, because it helps any user find the information that that's the background information about it. So the provenance tips. Who owns the photo today? What is the line of their inheritance of the picture? Did they get it from their grandmother? How did the grandmother maybe get it? If you know the line of inheritance, that's important. When and where did you copy that picture? What is the date, photographer, or other information on the back or on the bottom, if it's a cabinet card? Are there any special considerations about the picture that need to be discussed? Like, for example, the in-painting on my third great grandfather's picture. When you find a photo on Ancestry, don't you want to know that information if someone else posts it? I sure do. I found a painting of an ancestor of my wife, and I still don't know who owns it or where the original is. I'm glad to have the picture, but I don't know, I can't find any information about it, and the person who posted it hasn't replied back, so I'll never know for sure where the painting is. Here's another example of an ancestor. This one is of my wife's. This is of a man dressed in 1860s clothing, but the picture was taken from a studio in 1880s in Fredericktown, Knox County, Ohio. This man is named William Harrod, who happened to live in Knox County. He's in an album, a photo album, unlabeled, with a number of other Herod pictures. His son is in there, a number of his daughters are in there, his wife is in there. So from that information and from the context of where that picture is, I've put out there that a trial balloon that I think he could be this William Herod. I can't say for sure. I know that the face and the age and the clothing is indicative of a man in the 1860s, so it's probably a copy of a much older picture. And I can tell in my provenance there where the picture is, how, and say why I qualify and tentatively put the picture out as him. Now, I could have not posted it at all, just kept it in my album because I wasn't sure who he was. But I wanted to share it because I think having the picture out there may invite other comments and may help me identify it better. Maybe that same picture is owned by some other relative. Maybe they have the original daguerreotype. I believe in sharing it, but I also believe in qualifying it if it's not, if we don't for sure have a positive identification. So attaching documents is a good way also to add value to a tree, and make sure, first of all, you capture everything that Ancestry has to offer. At a minimum, you should have all of your census records on your tree attached to your particular ancestor. That's a no-brainer to have those on there and just attach them, because those are so easy to link. Agricultural and slave schedules, if applicable, put those on there. If there are tax records, there are lots of Pennsylvania land and tax records that are up online on Ancestry that you can just download. And don't expect them to come up, these documents to come up in your little green leaf, or that they'll automatically come up for you when you do a search, because they will not. You have to do some digging to find them. Now, there are vital record documents on there. There are will records on there for many different states that they've put up there, but they're often not indexed. So you have to go in, find the county, and find and then scroll through until you find the will that your ancestor is. Then it allows you either to link that page or to link the website page to it. But those are all things that make your tree better by having those documents on them. So be sure you get everything that you can that Ancestry offers, because they have a very rich and wonderful collection of material that's just available out there to use. Make the most of it. Make the most of your subscription. Then you can also go to Family Search and other websites, download documents, scan and upload documents that you have of your own family Bibles or records that you may have in your own collection, letters, pictures, things like that. Scan those and then add those to your tree as well. So here's an example from William Edgar, who's one of my ancestors. He was born in 1760, Pennsylvania, died in 1830 in Ohio. He doesn't appear on every available census, but he does appear in 1820 and 1830, so I have those schedules linked. I can find him in the Pennsylvania land grant and tax records, so I have those links. You can scroll further down on his page. I have some original records that I've put on as well. I have a deed record that I found for him. That deed is not on Ancestry, so I had to download it and find it on Family Search and download it. And I also found a land patent using the land patent records that are on the Pennsylvania land patent site. So I found some documents that were not readily available there, but in downloading them and uploading them to the tree, I've made it, I think, more substantial and more interesting. That turns out the deed is one of the key documents that proves who he is, proves that this William of Westmoreland County is the one that later ended up in Ohio. So having that document is very important. So go beyond Ancestry, look for records, upload your family Bible, go to Family Search, because there's so many wonderful documents and records of easily discoverable and downloadable on there, deeds, wills, tax records, and so forth. And when you find those, especially those that are illustrative of an argument, showing who is connected to whom, or who is maybe related to whom, that can be a really important document to add to your tree. Always add your source when you upload a document. You have a deed that you're finding on Family Search, put the deed book and page number on there, and use them to beef up your sketches. That it'll make your tree much more interesting and usable by having these other documents on there. So we go to this page. This is go walk through how we do this. We will choose the add option, and Ancestry will give you a number of different options when you want to add a fact. And there's a long list there: annulments, arrivals, baptisms, bar mitzvahs, circumcisions, blessings, all sorts of things. But surprisingly, it does not list deed and does not list court record among all the document options that it does. So you have to choose, if you're adding a deed, you have to choose custom event, which comes at the top. And once you choose custom event, you can add in the fact label, which is deed in this case. You can add a description. You can add the date of the deed, the place where it is. The description is where you want to put who's selling land to whom, and you put your deed book and page number in there so that someone can find it. And then if you have the image, you can go up to media, which you can see there on the left, and you click media, and then you can actually upload the image and link it to the event. So in this case, we have a deed from 1789 for William Edgar. William and Jane Edgar, or Eager before he changed his name, for 50 pounds sold land to William Brookholder, 50 acres in Mount Pleasant Township, called Williamsburg, deed book D, page 151. Then I can go to the media where I have scanned that page, and there is the deed. There it is for anyone to see. Some people have already found it. This is a great deed because it proves the name of his wife. She died before he did, and it gives information about where the family's land was. And later on, there's a deed where he releases he gives his power of attorney to one of his brothers and says where he's living, but goes right back to this very same deed because not all of the land from it was sold apparently, and there was an error in the survey. So I was able to link him from Ohio to Pennsylvania using the deed records, and that deed therefore becomes a very key piece of evidence in constructing that family. So we want to certainly upload that to the tree because that will alert anybody to the research that we've done. So build up your ancestors' timeline, add specific events, cite specific sources. All these things build value and credibility and greatly enhance the quality of your tree. You don't always have to have all of the specific documents downloaded to create the specific events. And you can do that as you have time, over time. It's a big process. We have lots of ancestors, and we go back further into time. We accumulate them, and so there's the job of beefing up all these sketches can be quite onerous as we go further back. But we want to do that as we work towards it. And so this is an example of an ancestor where I have built up his timeline, even though I have not really linked up that many documents to it. I've used books that we have in our collection that transcribe various deeds that he had and various court matters he was involved with, and I've cited those into his timeline, even though I haven't yet scanned the original document. So here's his page. I have all the census documents linked to him. He was born in 1745 in Delaware, died in 1824 in Kentucky. I don't have his marriage record, but I have an orphans court record that names his first wife, and cite that as evidence. As we go down, I go through all the deeds. He moves from Delaware down to South Carolina for a while before he comes to Kentucky, and he was in Spartanburg County for quite a number of years. He was a prominent landowner there, and so he's in a number of different deeds, and he names his brothers, and his brothers were witnesses to some of his deeds. Some of his nephews were witnesses, and so by finding all of these deeds and putting them on here using the abstracts that we have, I really sort of build up his timeline. And I can go back later and I can find that deed on Family Search, and at some point I plan to do that. But right now, at least I have the deed book and page number. I have a summary of what that deed shows, and I've built up the timeline with all of the information I can about him. He was in the South Carolina General Assembly from 1791 to 95, and then he was in the South Carolina State Senate a little bit later on. So it's kind of interesting. You can find him in these records, and that just you add those facts into the timeline, and you pretty soon have a very interesting biography that you've built up. So that if you ever want to go to write up this family later on, you have really begun the process, haven't you? You begin to assemble all the facts together, and that will really help you as you work further back or work forward or downward. You've begun to assemble the life story of that person. Then, of course, you want to add the will and you want to add the inventory if you have one. And this does not come up on the leaf. You have to dig for this. So you have to go into the Kentucky wills that are online, find Logan County, and go down and find his will. And then you can download the image and then upload it to the tree where it is for the will. So, and I put of course, the will book and page number for that so that anybody can find it later on. I've cited the full source. So those are the kinds of things you can do to build up your tree. I now, because of the will is there, anyone can see the names of his children that were listed in his will, so that if they look at the names of children that I have attached to his page, I can know that there's some basis for that. I can show what my basis of conclusion is because I have the will there right for him. Family Bibles are nice to add. This is an ancestor of my wife's, and we happen to have like 6 or 7 original family Bibles in our collection, and the information in them is pretty invaluable. My wife is an only daughter of an only daughter of a father who had a maiden aunt. So all the information in this particular line came down through one branch of the family, and we have all these Bibles. So putting that information online is I think, a good tool, because we've been able to share something that was very private with a lot of other researchers who may not have seen this information. And having the actual Bible there makes it more useful, I think. You should put in the title page of the Bible as well as the Bible pages itself, because that helps date the Bible and shows that it's an older Bible versus a newer Bible. This information would be less valuable if this Bible was published in 1960 than it was if it was published in 1870. So having that context of it is important. You could put in, of course, as well, the Provenance for the Bible. How did we inherit it? Who did you get it from? How did it pass down in the family? That makes it that much more valuable as a source. Just a brief mention here of something called the Genealogist Code. This is something that I, as a certified genealogist, have to sign when I become certified. It's a code a code of ethics that genealogists should adhere to. And one of the points of it is, I will not publish or publicize as fact anything I know to be false, doubtful, or unproved, nor will I be a party directly or indirectly to such an action by others. And the other point is, I will identify my sources for all my information and cite only those documents I have personally used. Now, this usually applies to client reports that someone compiles, or to an article or book that someone publishes. Does it apply as well to the public member trees? It could be argued. Because people use the trees, as I say, as experimenting for trial balloons, it's probably not as harshly applied to the trees as it would be if one were writing an article or a book. That said, you don't want to create a false tree with knowing information that's completely wrong or bogus either. So if you adhere to this and are careful about what you write and what you put in a tree, obviously mistakes are going to happen. Trees are going to be revised. They're a very fluid research tool. But you can still sort of adhere to this, I think, and try to be careful with your trees. You might want to make your public tree the information that you know is true, and then maybe have a private tree where you put in your speculations, where you do your research. That's an option that some people go for. And then as you prove something, then put it out on your public tree. So think about that as we go forward. Use qualifiers. If you're not sure of a person on your tree as a father, put a question mark after the name, or write a story explaining the problem of evidence that surrounds a particular person. You can discuss the research that you've done on that person and talk about where your roadblocks are in a very frank manner, and talk about the state of research and what needs to happen to go forward. I have an ancestor who was an illegitimate child born during the Revolutionary War in South Carolina, and no one knows who his father is. We've done DNA, and we don't really, it's not really conclusive from the Y DNA of who the father is or who the mother is. He took a name that may have been a fake name later on in his life. but trying to find his parents is very difficult. But so I've outlined all of the reasons why why there are problems with his line, and there are a lot of people who have attached wrong parents to him on their trees, and people who were married 20 years before he was born and had no other children. That's kind of a red flag right there. That someone got married in 1764 and they had their first child in 1781. Well, that bothers me, and that doesn't fit with other evidence. So I lay out the evidence that the problem, and so that someone who is doing and working on that same line can know what the problems are and know where the limits are, the research in your own research, and where the roadblocks are, and then maybe that will inspire them to come up with something new. Or you can write a comment in a birth box. And this is another ancestor of mine. This is a seventh great grandmother in my umbilical line, my mother's 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 mother, going back into Switzerland. And she had an unusual name named Salome Neuenschwander. She died in 1775. And on her death record, it says that she was from the town of Langnau in Switzerland. But I have been through the Langnau records, and I've been through many, many surrounding towns looking for her: Sumiswald, Trub, Troxelwald, Alpersville, Eggeville, Erisville, Lutzelfluh, and a whole lot of others, and can't find her birth. But we do have a number of autosomal DNA matches to a couple, Benedict and Anna Neuenschwander, who had children in the Swiss town at the right time period. And there's a gap in the known children of them where Salome could have been born. Is Salome the daughter of Benedict and Anna? I don't know. I don't know for sure. So I've written a little essay for her. I've put a caveat in her birth box on her tree saying what I've looked at. The parents are unproven. I've put them up on the tree anyway because the DNA evidence from it is very interesting to me. Of course, she has a double line there of Neuenschwanders from both her mother and her father, so that may affect the evidence that I'm getting. But I'm finding a number of matches to siblings, potential siblings of her, which makes me think that this is where she probably belongs. But it's not proven, so I put parents are unproven. So that's the kind of thing you can do. I could put question marks besides the names. Just be aware of that and alert the user to problems like this, because it'll make your tree more believable and valuable if you tell them that you're not quite sure of a particular connection. So here's some concluding thoughts. Ancestry's trees are full of errors. Treat them critically. Treat them as the tool that they are, a valuable tool for clues, but that they're not written in stone. Be careful using others' data. Use them for every clue you can drain out of them, but know that they can be error prone. Don't try to police them because there's no way you're going to correct a problem once it gets out there. It's going to spread, and there's no way to correct it. That said, the trees are very versatile, and as I tried to show you, you can do a lot with your personal tree. You can attach a lot of documents. You can put proof arguments in. You can add pictures. You can do a lot with the trees. The Ancestry's trees are really quite a versatile and wonderful tool, and a great organizational tool. And finally, and I think most valuable, is the fact that you can connect to others through them. And I would approach them with that spirit in mind, and hopefully you can make some cousin connections. That's what the trees really are all about, are the connections we get from them. And then we can maybe find some other cousins that may help us. We can team up with them with research, and maybe we can come up with some answers where we have our roadblocks. So thank you very much. And I will take some questions. Maybe you'd like to share some of your own experiences with trees, problems you've had, or ask me some questions if I can answer them. So thank you.